Our next speaker is Mike Lorrey. Mike, are you here? I think you are.
Yes, I am.
Awesome. So Mike, let me introduce you real quick. You are a U.S. Air Force veteran. You have a range of experience in aerospace, virtual reality, and cryptocurrency, just like me. You're part of the group of innovators who developed the concepts that were eventually published and coded into the Bitcoin algorithm. You also developed the first virtual stock exchanges as a VR developer, and you've served as an advisor to several cryptocurrency firms over the past decade. Mike, you currently develop content for Opensim, which I believe you're running our event in Opensim right now, which is awesome.
Yes, I am. There's about 8 or 9 people in attendance right now watching the live stream.
Very cool. Also Decentraland and Somnium Space based clients, and serves as the chair of the exhibits committee for the International Spaceflight Museum. Welcome, Mike, to the Marscoin Expo. We'd love to hear what you have to say today.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed listening to the previous speakers. Philip, I love your monetary history discussion. I'm a big fan of the creature from Jekyll Island and all that kind of stuff, and I could go on and on because of my history in crypto. A lot of the guys who were part of the pre-Satoshi team, as we call it, were they're gold bugs. They were concerned over the failure of the early digital currencies in the 1990s, and they would either fall into one of two traps. Either they would go fiat and they would just overproduce their digital tokens to pay their bills, and they would just collapse from hyperinflation, and they would hyperinflate their depositors' money into worthlessness. The other side is people would try to create trust in their digital money by backing it with gold or silver, like eGold and Pecunix and so on and so forth. And what started happening with those companies is that governments or criminals, but I repeat myself, would come in and seize their gold and silver, claiming that they were concerned that their digital money was being used to fund terrorism, money laundering for drug dealers, and tax evasion. The usual bugaboos that we've all heard about crypto. And so they would seize the gold and silver. And after seeing those kind of actions, we were all realizing that physical gold and silver was a point source security risk. Just having it anywhere because government and criminals could steal it at any time, of course. And so we were wondering, how could we mathematically replicate the macroeconomic behavior of sound money? And so Nick Szabo, Hal Finney, and Wei Dai, they were developing ideas like the hash cash and the first wallets and these using cryptography to create these encrypted tokens. But we were all members of a think tank at the time called the Extropy Institute, that was based in California and promoted a lot of various transhumanist philosophy topics and agendas. And so we were talking about these issues. And so one of the retorts was, well, all someone has to do is to hack into your computer and copy your coins, because then each coin would be its own file in your hard drive, and go and spend them, and you'd have nothing to do. So my contribution to the project was saying, well, if we had this massive database that everyone had copies of as a public ledger to track chain of custody from the point of creation to the current custody, you'd be able to track every coin. You'd be able to ensure that people spending coins actually own them. And if your account gets hacked, then theoretically you could implement measures that would allow you to actually recover stolen coins as well. That particular feature has never been implemented in Bitcoin, but all the other ideas wound up getting turned into the Satoshi paper. Nick Szabo took what I had suggested, and you realize that that was really kind of solving the whole Byzantine generals problem, and he used his game theory expertise to implement that idea. And so basically all that wound up into the Satoshi paper in 2008. In 2006, you know, this was all still very much a academic exercise, and I wasn't making any money at it. So I said, well, I need to get busy, and so I decided to go off and make my millions selling imaginary land to people in Second Life, and I became one of their top developers, one of the top independent developers, and I developed the first virtual stock exchanges there, and I helped capitalize a number of user-created businesses, and eventually I capitalized the first Opensim grid. And Opensim is basically an open source version of Second Life, and there are now hundreds of Opensim grids, and I develop on several of them. One of them is kitely.com, where the International Spaceflight Museum has one of its facilities. Its other main facility is in Second Life, and they provide virtual exhibits of all the world's rockets, spacecraft, exhibits about astronauts and space probes and so on and so forth. And so that's kind of, you know, how crypto and VR kind of crept together for me, is that I'd been developing ideas for you basically turning the asset system for virtual worlds into a blockchain-based system rather than just a MySQL database, to enable content creators to protect their intellectual property rights to their 3D content with smart contracts, and that would, you know, prevent a tool that rippers called copybotters use to steal content. And so merging those two technologies has been something I've been working on. And so yeah, so in the past decade, I've advised a number of crypto companies such as Octaneum. I devised their whole ecosystem. I was a CTO for Metalyfe, which was a privacy browser similar to Brave, and a number of other smaller projects. And so let me get my screen going here and start sharing. Where's my share button? Present, there we go. All right. So we can. So my talk today is about building and deploying a solar orbit satellite constellation to stream Marscoin traffic. Now, I'm relatively new to Marscoin. I hadn't even heard about it a few months ago. I've been developing a lot of content for the ISM about I'm building basically a large simulator of an entire Mars base that has all kinds of things from ISRU technologies to sustainable agricultural and underground tunneling, hyperloop, so on and so forth. Basically everything that Elon Musk has been envisioning building on Mars. So we're creating a virtual version of that. And so I started saying, well, you know, Mars really needs its own currency. So I was like, we'll make a fork of Bitcoin and build in some smart contracts and so forth. And someone said, well, there is this Marscoin, so you may want to check it out. So I looked it up, and I got in touch with James, and we had a chat, and so this is something where I felt it was really needed because blockchain is a time-based database system. That's the core of Bitcoin, and not just all proof of work systems, but also proof of stake systems, is that you've got all the transactions for a given amount of time go into blocks, and they get authenticated by a mining or staking system in the basis of proof of stake, and then they get authenticated and then confirmed. And so time is a problem in space because we've got large distances in space, and large distances in space obviously mean light speed delays. So you've got signal time. So for instance, going from Earth to Mars is an issue that can range in time from 4 minutes up to as much as 24 minutes. And that really doesn't contribute much to having a secure blockchain just to start with. So, you know, when you're dealing with a Martian blockchain, we've got an issue where you have to wonder, where are all the transactions going to be? So I call it the man, bear, pig of Marscoin traffic, if you're familiar with that meme. So, you know, we're going to have on Earth colonists planning transport, traders arbitrating Marscoin assets, investing into Mars infrastructure. Between planets, colonists in transit will be executing their plans as they spend several months sitting on their butts in a rocket waiting to get to Mars, or floating on their butts rather. The asteroid miners in near Earth and near Mars asteroids may be executing claims. You're going to have interplanetary traffic control. And part of the core of this proposal is having Mars node satellites in space. And then on Mars, you're going to have colonists transacting, purchasing, selling assets, and general currency transactions. So, you know, this is the big problem, is that if you are going to have a Mars-based currency and an open platform, you're going to wind up having almost all the miners and nodes back on Earth. And when you've got a 4 to 24 minute light speed delay between most of your users to most of your miners, you're going to have a huge issue with not just getting things authenticated, but getting keeping Byzantine fault tolerance in your blockchain. So if you're familiar with the Byzantine generals problem, is that I won't go into the details on that, but basically the idea is that if someone controls 51% or more of the computer assets mining a blockchain, they can control which transactions get authenticated, and they can inject false transactions into the blockchain. So this is why decentralization is so important to blockchain, is you want to have the people competing to mine crypto divided up into a lot of little factions so that nobody controls a majority of the computational assets. And so this is a huge problem, particularly when you've got this huge light speed delay, where you could have a situation where, you know, someone on Earth could accumulate a majority of the mining rigs on Earth and focus them on mining Bitcoin, and basically steal all the coins of everyone on Mars, and it'll be a half hour before anybody on Mars has any idea what happened. And that's irreversible. So that's really not an acceptable situation, right? And furthermore, if we turned it around and said, well, we're only going to recognize mining rigs that are on Mars, well, then nobody on Earth is going to want to transact in Marscoin if they're going to be put in the same situation of security vulnerability. So we've got to create an even playing field across the solar system. So we want people to be able to use Mars coins for all of their transactions. So here we've got a Mars coin at my Hyperloop station, a Marscoin ATM that people can transact with, and they can pay for their Hyperloop fares, pay their air tax on Mars. There's no such thing as a free lunch, as Heinlein used to say. And you can buy your hydroponics with Mars, sell your waste for Mars. And here I just registered my first prospecting claim as a Mars NFT. So the idea is that we want to put the master nodes into a stable orbit halfway between Earth and Mars orbits. So this is the Mars node orbit constellation that I'm proposing. And so here on this chart, we've got the red line is the Martian orbit. We've got the blue line is the Earth orbit, and the green line is the Mars node orbit, and the green dots are a relatively evenly spaced Mars node satellites. There'll be a total of 36 of them in the first generation. And so then we can see with these orange circles, that circle is a 3-minute signal light cone. So anything within those circles can communicate with the Mars node satellite that's in the center of that circle. So on the left side, where the Earth orbit and Mars orbit come relatively close, we've actually got a pretty good distance. It's only about 90 seconds from a Mars node satellite to Mars and to Earth. But over on the other side, where they're very far apart, then it just gets to just under 3 minutes, about 2 minutes and 50 seconds. But we've got, and throughout the whole orbit, with 36 satellites, we can provide complete Mars node satellite coverage to both Earth and Mars on an even time lag basis. So everybody is happy. There's no Byzantine fault weakness that can be exploited. And so we can basically build a Martian economy that is integrated with suppliers on Earth. They're going to be shipping equipment to Mars that's going to allow people in transit, riding their SpaceX starships from Earth to Mars. All the way through that whole flight, they'll all be able to interact with Mars node satellites as well. So they'll be able to, whether it's paying for supplies or mining or whatever they want to do, they can all interact. So this is the Generation 1 Marscoin node satellite. The idea is to have 36 of these deployed by 2026, and just in time for the first large migration, if we go by Elon Musk's aggressive plans, since he's expecting to have the first mission to Mars in 2024, and then the big first wave in 2026. We'll send out a Starship cargo rocket out with the 36 Generation 1 satellites, and we'll place those on a 2-year mission around the entire orbit, the Marscoin node orbit. And so these satellites have a good amount of solar power to provide power both to the node computers in the hub, but also to the phased array antenna that provide 360-degree coverage on the ecliptic, as well as coverage plus and minus 45 degrees above and below the ecliptic. So it can cover Earth and Mars wherever they are in their orbital inclination, as well as to near Earth and near Mars asteroids that may be getting the first asteroid mining ventures. And they get stabilized by inertia wheels and so on and so forth. Here's a close-up. So the MCNS Gen 1 has 6 by 206 panels of their phased arrays, and each panel has 256 transmitters at 10 watts per transmitter. And so not only does it allow it to accept and transact with people in many different directions at once, because of all of these different transmitters in the arrays. You can dedicate as many or as few transmitters to a given signal as you want. But also you can steer the entire beam. So for instance, one of the big problems with the long-term safety of space assets is dealing with coronal mass ejection. So there's 2 strategies that we're looking at developing for protecting these satellites. And one will be utilizing the phased array antenna itself to, when a coronal mass ejection is coming, to just dedicate that earthbound side beam to go shoot right into the coronal mass ejection, basically to punch a hole through it, so that the satellite doesn't get hit by as many charged particles. And a second concept that we're going to be exploring is to have a coil around the hub that will create an electromagnetic field to direct those charged particles away from the satellite entirely. So here's the orbital specifications of the Mars node satellites and looking at the details of the time delays involved. So we're analyzed the distance that Mars and Earth have to to the sun at perihelion and aphelion, and so we've got the distance for Mars at maximum and minimum. We've got a distance for Earth and at maximum and minimum, both perihelion and aphelion. And so then from that, we can then calculate the time delay for signals. And so the reason why there's both a minimum and maximum time distance for perihelion and aphelion is that we're measuring the distance, not from the planets to the sun, but actually the planets to our Mars node satellite, because when a satellite is basically in direct line between the planet and the sun, that's the shortest distance. But as they move out of sync with each other, you're going to have an increasing light speed delay that'll reach up to 23 degrees off of that axial orientation, and so that adds some additional delays. So we've got a light speed delay with a 36 constellation size that ranges from a minimum of 98 degrees for Mars at perihelion and 100 at Earth, and then a maximum for Mars at 111 and Tmax at 112, and then aphelion there as a proportionally larger amounts, and I've then calculated that to minutes. So this is basically a very rough estimate of what the orbit would be. Right now, a perihelion of just over 177 million kilometers and an aphelion of 201 million kilometers. The actual orbit will not be a nice big round number like that, because we want to trim those time delays so that they're as equal as possible in both directions. So here's the second generation of the Marscoin node satellite. Would be an additional 36 satellites, and they would be spaced in between the existing 36 satellites. So in this chart, we've got the green satellites of the generation 1, and the blue dots are the generation 2 satellites. And so this allows us to minimize the maximum transit time from a planet to its closest satellite. And these are larger satellites, and so they would be deployed around 5 or 6 per Starship mission, and these could be deployed around 2032, and they would be upgradable. We're going to get a look at how they can be upgradable in a minute here. So we look closer and we see here how the beam width to a point in Mars orbit, and the same goes for Earth orbit, is, so for the green is the Gen 1 satellites, and we see at the bottom the Gen 1 satellite beam width is going to be 46 degrees to provide continuous coverage for Mars from one satellite to the next. But when we put in the generation 2 satellites, that cuts that beam width down to 23 degrees. That reduces the distance from Mars to its closest satellite, so it reduces the transmit time. And not only that, but let's say one of the satellites gets hit by a meteorite or asteroid, or actually comes victim to a CME or something like that. By having these additional 36 satellites, we have redundancy, because these satellites also need to talk to each other along the line of their orbit to transmit blockchain data back and forth, because the planets are not, they're going to be in different places of their orbit at different times of the year. And so there's going to be a lot of traffic transmitted from, daisy chain from one satellite to the next, and so forth. So by having the additional 36 satellites, there's going to be redundancy in case one satellite gets whacked. The neighboring satellites will still be in transmitting range of each other, so there'll be no reduction in transmission capacity between satellites, and so the blockchain will remain secure. Another advantage of placing the satellites out here halfway between Mars and Earth is that it's a secure position. Number one, the orbit is stable. It's in a 4-5 resonance with Mars and a 2-3 resonance with Earth, which means that gravitationally, this orbit has a very long-term stability for a long, long time. So those satellites are going to stay there forever. And, you know, they'll be there long after humanity goes bye-bye for any reason. The equidistance, as I said before, aids Byzantine fault tolerance. And the Gen 2 satellites, one of the big features of that is they were adding a data center to each satellite. And the other advantage of the entire constellation is that because these are not on Earth or on Mars, they're extraterritorial. So we don't have to worry nearly as much about some government coming in and trying to take over the Marscoin blockchain. And it also provides access for all interplanetary vessels and asteroids. So this is the Gen 2 satellite. And you see it's a bit bigger. Up at the top, we've got the same transmitter hub that the Gen 1 satellite has, but we've added a lot more power and the radiators are larger. And then you notice behind that center solar panel that also acts as a sunshade, we've got a module that looks like a big inflatable Bigelow module. And we're going to get a look at that next here. So the Node 2 satellite, Node Gen 2 satellite, has a Bigelow module built in here. It's got a lot more maneuvering capability. It's got an airlock. So it's got more inertia wheels. It's got built-in Hall thrusters. It's got 4 times the cooling capacity, 2.5 times the power of the Gen 1 satellite. The Bigelow module can host up to 1,000 Marscoin related servers for mining, smart contracts, trading, NFTs. It's a dockable module, as I said. There's an airlock at the bottom. So new missions can go in there, dock. They can replace broken or old equipment. They can upgrade to new equipment. The interior of the module is going to be a neutral nitrogen atmosphere, so there'll be no risk of fires. And the nitrogen will act as the primary coolant to cool the servers. And so then we look inside. So here's the rack structure. And so there's going to be enough power for 140 watts per server. The nitrogen is the nitrogen gas is the primary coolant. And that will again then heat exchange with a liquid coolant that will then go to the radiators outside that hide behind the solar panels to radiate excess computer heat off into space. And so here I am with my astronaut avatar floating inside. And so the rack space would be owned as NFTs in MCNS DAO. So the idea is to organize a distributed autonomous organization that would own the entire satellite constellation, and the DAO would be owned by its users. And so they would be staking their assets in the system, and their voting would be part of the governance mechanism. So why a DAO? So number one, it allows the assets to be decentralized in ownership. So that ensures that even if the constellation becomes the dominant means of transmitting Marscoin data, it's not a monolithic organization, that the assets are all decentralized. The rules of the DAO can place limits on how much any one entity can own in the DAO, so it can prevent the 51% collaboration threshold from occurring. And so people can have different levels of investment for controlling different amount and types of assets. And so all the assets, the satellites, the servers, can all be NFTs, tradable on chain, and the NFT ownership is a stake in DAO voting and share in earnings. And so it'll also enable colonists to grow ownership in the DAO while still having liquid assets on the chain. And staking the NFTs enables DeFi to capitalize on the Martian economy and a whole lot more. So the DAO structure, and this is just a preliminary proposal, is there going to be a lord of the one satellite ring? No, there's no kings, just a ring. There'll be 12 doges of the DAO, basically representing 12 zodiac houses. And so they'll basically be kind of the board of directors of the organization. And so then your account of the DAO will be someone who has an investment equal to one whole satellite. And then you can have barons that would be up to 100 server racks. A Knight of the Blades would be 10 racks, and an Esquire would be 1 server. And then your typical yeoman would be someone who's staking a lot of digital assets to secure the network. And so the dev team leader sits as 1 doge. And so the earnings from that funds development, reinvestment, and expansion, such as working on developing the Gen 2 technology and a new ring in the asteroid belt at a later date. So here's the timeline. 2021, organize the dev team, write the white paper, raise the seed, design Gen 1 sats. 2022, sometime, launch the token sale for the DAO. Begin production in 2022 of Gen 1 sats and secure a Starship launch for Gen 1. And develop a Mars ISRU NFT contract system. And then in 2024, deploy the Starship launch on a 2-year mission to deploy the Gen 1 satellites so that by 2026 can activate a full Gen 1 MCNS network. And so that everything's hunky-dory for a couple of years, work out any issues and solve those. And then in 2028, finalize the Gen 2 design, do a second token sale if needed for funding the construction of the Gen 2 satellites in 2029, and then start launching those on 6 to 7 Starship cargo missions in 2030. And then so by 2032, we can activate the 36 Gen 2 sats. And then iterating on beyond that as things grow, develop Gen 2A sats that would be upgraded communications, newer computer technology, and so forth. And those Gen 2A stats would start replacing the original Gen 1 stats. And then we'd be moving the Gen 1 sats out beyond Mars to the asteroid belt to provide Marscoin connectivity to asteroid miners further into the belt. And so here's our Mars base in kitely.com, where we've got our new Starship landers here on base and so forth. So that's the presentation. This is me. And so I want to thank James for including me in this event, and this has been great. I hope that we're going to keep broadcasting the whole event in Opensim at our Mars base. There's a venue where if you've got a Opensim avatar, you can log in and come to what we call the Universal Habitat region in Kitely and participate in watching the live stream on YouTube. So there we go. So we can do some questions now.
Thank you so much, Mike. This is really fascinating stuff. Really interested in your design for the satellite constellation. A question I have is, could this be also leveraged to assist with communications between Earth and Mars, possibly sending back science results, for example, from Mars back to Earth?
It could be done, and this is a matter of how much, not just you could have basically an open communications throughput if the blockchain is not using up all the capacity. you could actually utilize NFT systems on chain actually for scientists to register their scientific data so that they can basically prioritize, first claim to having discovered things and so forth. So that would help document discoveries and so forth. So that's another possible use for utilizing NFT technologies on the chain.
Mm-hmm. And then you had Bigelow modules as part of your hardware design. Because that company isn't around anymore, do you have a good replacement vendor for that?
Well, they're go in reorganization, whether they come out of bankruptcy and get back into operation. As far as I know, they just went silent because of COVID, and so they couldn't have day-to-day operations because of that. I don't see why they wouldn't just restart up now that things are loosening up. But in that case, I would be very surprised if Mr. Bigelow was not astute enough to try to find some other business to buy the assets of the company if he did not want to continue its operation.
Yeah, it's really fascinating what they did, because I remember way back in the day there was the Transhab module that NASA was working on, and not that project never got funded, and so basically Robert Bigelow just kind of swooped in and bought the IP for that, or acquired it from NASA, and started Bigelow Aerospace. And yeah, for those that don't know, I mean, they've flown into space on Russian rockets. They have a lot of legacy history of developing that technology. It's really I also hope they are able to reorganize very quickly and leverage all the work they did.
Just last year, even while they were closed, NASA put the Bigelow inflatable module on the ISS. So it's the technology is in use, and there's no reason why they can't get back into operation now that the pandemic is allegedly over.
Yeah, for those that don't realize what Bigelow Aerospace, they're innovative because it's an inflatable module as opposed to what the ISS uses, which are just aluminum cans, basically, that if a micrometeorite strikes that, you have a problem, whereas the inflatable habitats, you have layers of fabric that could protect you, as well as more volume.
Yeah, it's not only good micrometeorite protection, but it's actually superior radiation protection from a metallic module, because with charged particles come in and they hit the metal, and they actually create more isotopes that shoot off inside by colliding with the metals, because basically those charged protons from the sun come in at sometimes at speeds, and not just the sun, but galactic cosmic rays as well. They come in at speeds that you would normally see in particle accelerators that are used to do transmutation experiments. So, those sorts of strikes can generate a lot of nasty secondary isotopes bouncing around inside, whereas the Bigelow module, being a fabric that's mainly polymers, though that fabric is very dense in hydrogen atoms, and hydrogen is a great absorbent of protons, and so it's really a superior radiation protection to having a metal canister.
Nathan is asking, who would take control of the satellite launch project? Would another private company take a hold of this one?
Well, this is something that I've got a big interest in. So, if people are interested in this, I would love to organize a team for this, and basically the DAO would be the company. And so it would be its own organization, and it would do a token launch to raise capital to build the satellites, and then it would hire SpaceX to launch the satellites on a Starship cargo rocket, and so then the DAO would continue to operate those satellites on an ongoing basis.
Okay, Mike, well, we're out of time. This was really fascinating. Thank you so much for participating with our event today.
Sure. Glad to be here.
Awesome.